But I think the fact that you're young, you have time to experiment and see what you actually love.
So welcome to this segment of the Careers podcast. My name is Edward, and with me right now I've got Julian Cachia from Jewel Productions. So Julian, could you introduce yourself a bit first of all, a bit of your background?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. Really feels great. Feels strange being on the other side of the microphone. As you said, my name is Julian. I'm from Jewel Productions. We're basically a small budding video production agency based in Malta, and our slogan is creating share-worthy content for forward-thinking brands. So basically we create commercials for companies and campaign videos, and trying to do so in a very kind of original way in order to boost engagements on social media.
Okay, so in fact that's what we're going to sort of tackle a bit now, the idea of social media. So just to expand on that background, you own and run a video production company, and you are how old?
I'm 20 years of age.
So you're 20 and you've already sort of reached that level. So as a creative entrepreneur, you've managed to get in at a young age, you've managed to cement yourself, you've done some pretty big commercial work.
I wouldn't say cement myself, but it's obviously a very competitive industry, so and it's a very subjective one. So as you know, the creative arts, for some people, your product may be really good. For others, maybe they prefer other work. So cementing yourself is maybe something which is a very it's a very liquid term in our industry. But I do think that we were fortunate enough to work with some really nice clients over the 3 years that we've been operating, and we hope to continue growing our clientele, to be honest.
So social media. Basically, at this point, everyone uses it. It's taken over our life, some people would say. But even though sometimes maybe social media can be seen as a negative thing, a toxic thing, for an entrepreneur, especially a creative, social media is an opportunity, it's a platform. So you've probably, I assume you've really used social media and tried to utilize it and leverage everything towards you and towards your success, maybe using social media. Recently, this year, you sort of launched a bit of a new image for Jewel. What could you tell me a bit about that, about the use of social media as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think we're very fortunate as creators to have a platform which enables you to market yourself most of the time free of charge. So we live in a day and age where, and obviously I'm quite a newcomer, so I haven't experienced a life without social media. But I can imagine how more expensive and more difficult it was to market one service over mediums such as billboards, newspapers. Nowadays, social media gives you the opportunity to just exploit your services and be as present as possible, especially to a younger generation, over this vast network of social media platforms. So, as you said, we've recently, once we began 2021, we've launched a new image for our company. We've rebranded, and we've also came out with Project Jewel, which is a new take on what we're doing. So for the past 3 years, we've been operating solely as a commercial production, video production company. And now we're trying to build and nurture this sort of community for creators to have a local reference point for when it comes to listening about honest experiences and, doing our best to put out behind the scenes content for people to see how things are done in the commercial world. And we're using social media to promote and market our services. And, you can reach even international waters through these platforms.
I think one of your sort of strengths as well is the level of effort you put into each piece of work. So just a bit of context, Julian is also sort of the creative aspect of this podcast that you're seeing right now. Julian's the creative director for this, and he's also worked with us a lot before. I think, how do you feel about sort of, we've recorded another episode, in fact, another segment about the creative industry, and we talked a lot about can you make it in Malta? Do you have to travel abroad? How does the formal education system work in your favor or against you? One of the things that you and I have spoken about before, in fact, is this. It's the aspect of, at 20 years old, you've gone into the industry with a lot of people maybe weren't so sure and didn't make the move. You said that you've been doing this for 3 years, which means that you were 17.
Exactly.
When you started Julian.
First commercial project was at 17. Exactly.
Which is arguably earlier than most people get into the creative industry.
You could say so.
Maybe music artists, a bit more common to start earlier, but sort of for people like you, that's a pretty early age. What do you think led to you starting so? What made you so sure that, like, listen, this is what I want to do?
It's a good question. I've spoken openly about having the love for filmmaking since a very young age. So just to give you a bit of background, my brother and I used to create homemade short movies since the age of 7 and 8. And obviously, as you'd expect, they were very amateur style, but it was what led to kind of grow the sense of love for the art of filmmaking. And it was also a way to, escape daily chores and duties. And I'd have my mom yelling, "Come and wash the clothes, come on." and it was a way to, "Mom, I'm filming a movie with William." But that kind of developed into what we now call a business of our own. So back in 2016, I got sponsored to film a 2-year segment of underwater videos, basically to promote local marine life and underwater dive sites. And once our contract with the sponsors ended, so that was our first kind of professional opportunity, I decided to invest in a whole new arsenal of equipment. And probably that's what I was telling Will last time. Probably that's one of the stupidest things I've ever done. I've invested a bunch of money which was loaned to me without actually knowing how to use. I've never held a camera which had interchangeable lenses, for example, and I bought a 4,000 euro cinema camera and just expected to get commercial clients right off the bat just because I own this camera, and it certainly wasn't the case. So when I saw that it wasn't that easy to just, get big projects, first thing that came to mind was passion projects. And that's what I was doing during my years at junior college. Whenever I had an ounce of free time, I used to invest in creating stories and, testing different shots, different angles, different equipment. And until one day we got the opportunity to work with a commercial client, and, the rest is kind of history.
So you really went all in straight away.
All in.
Most people maybe don't take that approach. Maybe they start so in my case, I do photography. I started out just by asking my dad, "Listen, can I take your camera for a day?" And the day turns to a week. And I did my first couple of commercial pieces with that camera. The camera was technically not mine. And I hope the clients don't watch this. But, then eventually I invested into my own equipment, and like you said, there is a financial barrier sometimes to entering some of the creative arts.
It's much easier nowadays. I mean, you see the type of technology that's coming out nowadays. With the same amount of money I invested initially, you'd probably be much better off in today's world. I mean, 6K pocket cinema cameras are coming out for 2,000 euros, and you can match cinema quality quite easily with Netflix approved quality. So I think that as years go by, it's getting relatively easier to, get yourself real decent equipment for quite a budget-friendly.
And to start, you don't even need that level of investment. To start, all you have to have is the creative drive and the willingness to learn. I think one of the biggest frustrations, probably in any industry, but like you said, you bought the gear and you thought the gear was going to make the films. The gear is the tool.
Exactly.
But you as the creative are the person behind them.
Exactly.
I think that's where maybe a lot of people don't understand. They say, you have great cameras. Of course your stuff looks good. But they don't see all of the hours and days, weeks, months, years of learning that you went through the process. And I think that's one of the biggest maybe problems with the industry, is that most people don't understand what goes into it. I mean, at your level, when you're doing stuff like commercials for TV, that kind of thing, those are big productions. You know, you've got crews, you've got hair and makeup, you've got the models, the actors, you've got a lot going on. But behind every person shooting something like that, there's a previous version of themselves that started, like you said, like you and your brother, shooting home videos. And I think we need to do a bit more to nurture that into, because I wouldn't even want to see how many people, how many talent has been lost because the talent exists, but no one ever points them in the right direction to take it seriously. Like in your case, what sort of, did you make the decision yourself? Did you have support from the people around you when you made that decision at 17 years of age?
It wasn't easy. I mean, as you could expect, and as you were saying before, the society kind of points you in one direction, and with the creative arts, you kind of go the opposite. With me, I was always inclined to go into medicine and surgery, so that's my background. And whenever I used to go to counseling for career guidance, for example, I remember Form 3 or Form 2, I was never asked if I have any hobbies which I'd like to turn into a profession. And I think it's something which kind of disintegrates some talent along the way, not promoting the creative arts as a potential career. It does kind of hinder the creative arts being a profession for some people. So for me, when I was in junior college, during first year, I had already invested in my equipment. So at around that time, I was investing my time in passion projects. I wasn't particularly in love with the subjects I was studying. So first year, I decided to take a gap year. Actually, I decided to just stop first year at around March, and I resubmitted an application to go back into junior college the following year, this time not with sciences but with marketing. And surprisingly enough, I re-stopped in March, this time not because I wasn't in love with the subjects, but my opportunities within the industry and the opportunities to grow my business for me at the time were more of a priority. I got some nice opportunities at the time and said, I'll take a gap year, see where it takes me, and gap year turned into 2 years of
later,
3 years of you know, working full time in this industry. So I think it was just being brave enough and taking the risk, taking the plunge. I didn't know what it could lead to, but as Mark was saying earlier on, I mean, everyone says time passes by too fast. I mean, you're young, so study. But I think the fact that you're young, you have time to experiment and see what you actually love. I'd rather spend 2 years trying to grow a business which ends up failing, but I know that I've tried it and it didn't work, rather than ending up studying something which I didn't really love and working 60 years of my life knowing that I never tried growing my business in the creative arts. So
living without, as cliche as it is, living without regrets.
Exactly.
I always think of the film scene of No Regrets on his tattooed on someone's chest.
Right.
It was like considered a running joke almost. I think it's actually a really important long-term advice to do what you do and what you want to do, because I think when it comes to career pathways, sometimes some people make the mistake of doing it to please society in general, other people, maybe their parents. But I think if you make that sacrifice and you give up your dreams, again, cliche, but if you give up your dreams for someone else or something else, they're not going to reciprocate and give them back. You've given that up, and that's one of the most important things you could possibly have, which is satisfaction with what you do.
100%.
Now, sometimes some people maybe have it, I don't want to say easier, but maybe more straightforward, that what society expects of them, what their parents expect of them, what they want to do, all happen to line up. And I think all well and good for when that happens, but we should accept, and people should be willing to step out of their comfort zone in order to branch out and do what they want to do. I think I said this in another segment, where the worst thing that can happen is a learning opportunity. Not a mistake is a learning opportunity, and that's literally the worst case scenario. Obviously, taking risk comes with reason. Don't take maybe unnecessary risk. Maybe investing €4,000 into a cinema camera at the age of 17 was a big risk, but here you are, so clearly something worked out along the line. We started talking about social media originally. That was where we wanted this to go. But we've gone a bit off track on that, but I think it's still great content. To try pull back to the social media topic. How do you feel? Like, do you manage your own personal social media? Do you try to push Julian on social media, or do you focus most of your efforts on pushing Jewel as a production company? Do you try to build a personal brand?
That's a really interesting topic and a really interesting question, because I had this discussion recently. To be honest, as of the now, I do not promote myself as a director of photography. We just push the video production agency, and that's it. However, I do believe that it's very important and very vital to create a separate entity for me personally. And that goes, I think, for all creators. Sometimes there's a team, most of the times, there's a team effort behind every production Jewel makes, but it's nice to acknowledge and put out there your own personal portfolio of the works that you specialize in. So that is something that is in the works. I don't have the time, honestly, to manage 2 social media accounts for sure at the moment, but it's something that I really wish to invest more time in, just compiling a portfolio of personal works. Who is Julian? Tipo, maybe if you say Julian, Dr. Jewel, taf kif?
Yes.
So maybe just an own personal image with a portfolio of my own works. So that I think would be nice.
So that is something that's in the pipeline.
Hopefully.
I think it's important because I think this generation, like in the last maybe, I don't know, sort of 10 years, brought forward the viability of an entrepreneurial venture as a personal brand. It's already existed before. Personal brands have existed for decades. Just they took different forms, they expressed themselves through different media on different platforms. But the concept has always been there. But social media, I think, brought it forward. It's easier than ever to build a personal brand.
Even now with platforms like YouTube paying you, making it a profession to be a YouTuber is making a lot of people, just exploit their talent and pushing their personal brand in order to make a living out of it. So that is also something which I think it's part of the pros of the advancements of social media nowadays.
I think for sure, like the idea that a YouTuber is a career, some people still don't wrap their heads around that, particularly maybe the older generations, they don't see it. It doesn't make as much sense to them, but the fact that, like you said, so a YouTuber, most people don't understand as well how a YouTuber makes money. Like a YouTuber has YouTube AdSense, which is the advertising revenue that YouTube itself pays you. But there's also other aspects. There's brand deals. There's some of them still do what their commercial work would be. So in the case where there's a YouTuber who teaches about a particular industry or talks about a particular industry, like for someone like you and me could relate to someone who's in the photography or videography business, they still do commercial work, but YouTuber is like another aspect of what they do, and it goes back to that personal brand. And I think that's another thing. YouTube is a social media platform, and not many people acknowledge it as such. Most people, when you say social media, think, okay, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn-ish. TikTok nowadays is obviously a huge thing that's brought people forward.
Cool.
And we've seen cases where young Maltese people, like in the last 2 months, I believe, we saw 2 sort of emerging little news pieces about people who built significant brands, including like well over, the 100,000 and even the million mark on TikTok and on YouTube. And I think people are slowly starting to realize that this is really viable. I think one of the aspects that people are missing is that I saw some research recently that said that 60% of teenagers under the age of 17 that were polled about what they want to do, 60% of them, the answer was entrepreneur, which is something that I do not think would have happened maybe 20 years ago. I think social media is starting to bring out almost the possibilities that life in general can offer you, and that being an employee is still a totally viable option, and it's an option a lot of people take. But you can do. I think people are realizing they have more control over their lives than they realize.
It's also a new kind of culture I'm noticing with people like Gary Vee, promoting this entrepreneurial lifestyle, and it's very appealing to young people. I mean, with me, it's the same thing. I mean, being an entrepreneur is super fun. You're in charge of your days, you're your own boss practically. You take the jobs that you want to do, but at the same time, nobody talks about kind of the hardships. When you're given the responsibility of producing a TV advert, for example, because you mentioned that, you have the logistical aspect of it, the sleepless nights trying to edit, to submit on time, the problems with contracts, the payments. It's all things which in a way kind of hinder the creative process as well. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent just chasing payments and reading through contracts and signing this and signing that, and it's
proposal meetings, making your pitch.
It gets busy really fast. You can get lost. I mean, I've fallen victim to getting drowned in work, ending up in disasters. It's not good on the mind. You start losing time for yourself, for your loved ones. So I think it's very good to keep in mind that even if you're trying to grow your own business, sometimes it's good to take a step back, take it easy, focus on what you really want to be doing. Sometimes you're getting a lot of business deals, you're accepting them to grow your business, and you realize this is not what I want to be doing in terms of content creation. This is not in line with my vision, with my mission statement. So, realign yourself with your vision ultimately.
And I think that's why it's so important to set your vision in the first place. Going into it without a plan, some things would not go according to your plan, and that's just part of the journey. But having a plan, especially having defined outcomes that you're looking for, and outcomes don't need to be, for example, financial based. I want to be making so much money, or I want to have so much social media following. I think having outcomes that you yourself have control over. I want to be able to put out this quality of work. I want to be able to put out this amount of work, maybe. Things that having outcome goals that you directly have control over, because certain other factors, sometimes you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because you're setting goals which part of it is not within your control. But I think if you set your goals to things you fully have control over, and then knowing that those goals that you set will lead to the other things, maybe they will, maybe they won't, I think it sets you up on a better basis. But then you set out the road and then you follow it. Trying to build the road as you go along, you might make wrong turns. But if you set out that road carefully, I think you'll be on a good track to start. And like we said before, you will make mistakes, some things will not go according to plan. It's part of the journey, and it's important then.
You have to be flexible at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, every opportunity is a new opportunity to grow your skills and just become a better creator at the end of the day. So, in my experience as well, I started off with an initial vision, and some opportunities come along which you sway from the original vision, but end up saying isma Allah kemm ikun dil ħaġa eżempju taf kif, and you realign and re-envision the original idea. So I think it's very important for people to be flexible as well. So
yep. Julian, I really want to continue this conversation, but unfortunately we've really run out of time. Thank you very, very much for sitting in for this.
Thank you.
This is a conversation that if we want, we could take hours and hours and hours with, but we'll call it an end here. Thank you very much, and that brings to a close this segment of the Careers Podcast.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.